Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the Weekly Review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and with me this morning we have Lucy Newberger, John Gibbs, and Brent Poland. You're all very welcome. How are you all?
Doing good.
Wonderful.
Well.
Great. It's been another busy week. What's that, Brent?
My resting heartbeat is a lot lower. I've been checking my heart monitor, but I'm 5 weeks in. Results for this week, and I've been noticing my resting heart rate is back to its normal level. So be interested to see what happens in 2 weeks' time when I'm back at school. I'll keep you updated. I'll produce a graph for that.
Do you wear a watch?
Yeah.
Yeah, you need one of those watches that measures all that. Yeah. Well, it's been a busy week. In education, as ever, we've had GCSE results. People, as Brent has just indicated, really seriously gearing up for the new year now. But it's a bank holiday weekend. We've got 3 great stories for you and 3 great shows, which we will talk about after these messages.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
So, a story that slipped into the news this week is that there is a proposed new primary science curriculum. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that film Around the World in 80 Days. You know, where Phileas Fogg is challenged by all of these, these stuffy old establishment scientists, and, they challenge him to go round. The new curriculum is proposed, and I'll get into trouble for this because they probably aren't stuffy people anymore, by the Royal Society for Chemistry, the Institute of Physics, the Royal Society of Biology, and the Association for Science Education. And what they're saying is that primary science should be about sucking lollipops, sitting in the dark. I think it's fantastic. And before I just come to you, Lucy, I'm going to quote one of our local poets here. He's kind of a local boy, done good, Seamus Heaney, they call him. And he wrote a poem called Personal Helicon, and he says, "As a child, they could not keep me from wells, old pumps with buckets and windlasses." This must be a good news story that goes a long way to allowing children to be children. Isn't it, Lucy?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, science is meant to be investigative, which I can't say, but it's meant to be immersive. It's meant to be, so I can see Brent cackling, but it's meant to create that wonderment. It's meant to be hands-on, doing experiments, doing investigations, trial and error, all these things that we need to introduce children to from a young age. The sort of more serious side, if you like, in terms of kind of writing up investigations, you can introduce that later on, but why not use things like melting ice lollies, sitting in the dark, mucking around with things? That's what creates the joy. That's what creates the wonderment. And that to me is so much of what's missing from this curriculum at the moment. It's music to my ears, as you can imagine. I mean, we've talked at length about sort of what kind of teacher I am, and I love kind of getting involved with all these things and messing about, but also encouraging teachers to actually embrace the mess a little bit and embrace the fact that it's, science doesn't have to be perfect, particularly at primary level, and allowing children to sort of understand that it is a bit mucky and that you can get things wrong and that, it might be a bit sticky and a bit messy. And I'm sure there are teachers that are sort of thinking, going, the prospect of kind of getting messy is absolutely horrendous. No, it isn't. This is great. I think fantastic. I'm absolutely here for this.
I saw everybody nodding there, and I think we're all sold on it. I wish I were back at primary school. It'd just be great, you know. And they talk about playing with trucks on different surfaces and learning about fantastic. Now, they do admit, John, that this is about building science capital. So behind, you know, the headlines and the ice lollies and the superb articles by Michael Rosen and so on, does that serious side detract a little from what will be enjoyable lessons?
Well, I sort of don't mind if it does, really. In the end, you know, I think if the student remembers the great, you know, wonderful game we played, but can't remember why we played it, well, hey, that's part of that. It'll build. There'll be layers of other things. It'll get there in the end. Not everything has to be measurably achieved something. What have you achieved? It's that sort of walk into a classroom, every student must be learning and know what's going on. Not necessarily. A bit of bafflement's not a bad idea. And if a game is in itself fun, that's good for me. I remember, and also not just primary school, not just science, not just flashes and bangs and smells in primary school and such like, and ice lollies, but in secondary school as well. I remember a brilliant lesson where a teacher, a colleague of mine, turned his classroom into the Titanic. You know, the dining room of the Titanic. We were all one at a time. Other teachers and students were welcomed in, and kids were standing there like waiters. And then they stopped, and they each kid told the story of why they were traveling to America and stuff like that. It was drama in a humanities lesson, year 9. Absolutely brilliant. I know. Turn your classroom into the deck of the Titanic or something.
Wow.
Might feel like that sometimes anyway, but you know.
Yeah. Can I just say that ship was absolutely perfect when it left us? I just want to make that clear that when it left Northern Ireland, there was nothing wrong with it. Okay. Brent, if I could come to you, and something of a little more, you know, of a serious point on this. We've had 15 or 20 years where STEM subjects have been promoted. We've had A-level and GCSE results, and we know that arts and humanities and creative subjects are in decline. We also know there's a big link, you know, to mental health, and, you know, people are telling us that, you know, creative and expressive subjects are very important for that balance. You know, is this emphasis on fun science, is it going to create a further imbalance and maybe some unintended consequences?
And no, I think if you're being creative with science, you're still being creative. I think science is essential. I mean, it underpins science, maths, English are fundamentals, aren't they? They are core basics. And if you apply things like logic, you apply curiosity. I mean, I consider myself partly a scientist. I'm a geographer. So I use a lot of science, and again, my geography lessons when I was at school was walking and doing nature walks. Biology lessons were done going through Hanratty's bog and picking out water boatmen. You know, frog spawn in the classroom. Those science lessons were imbued with nature, imbued with and connected to the rest of the curriculum. I mean, if you understand science, I understood why the seasons turned, why the leaves were going a certain way. So you can get the creative. There's you know, science. And politics is a political science. So even in the arts, you have science running through there. So you can't sort of, I don't like it when people do that and say, well, you can't have one or the other. Why can't you? You can have, you know, Renaissance children where they are capable of doing multiple subjects and taking parts of the brain. And the brain should connect that way. My problem with this is all very well and good, but where's your Ofsted regime? Where's your senior management? Where's the school trusts? All the rest of it. So this is great proposed from the science guys themselves, probably using evidence. But when it comes down to it, how are you still going to be judged? You're doing something wacky and crazy, and some senior manager comes in and says, this is the lesson we prescribe at this trust. We should not let any other nonsense here. You don't have that academic freedom to be the creative teacher you see on those recruitment adverts on television. Because should you step out of line in some organizations, some trusts and some schools, then your creative curriculum just wouldn't fly, would it? So you need a culture shift with this. No point just saying, let's have a nice, new, fantastic curriculum. People have to have the sort of courage to be able to apply it, but also the support and the backup that should they experiment and should they have a bit of fun, that they're not judged, they're not undermined, and that they are given the support of a creative teacher. And that's what this comes down to as well. Because what you'd have here is the cognitive dissonance of saying, why can't teachers do fun things? You do fun things, you lose your job. You stick to the prescribed curriculum, do what you're told,
Yes.
you get promoted. So unfortunately, teaching's become, we all know what we want to do, but we're pushed into certain areas where we've lost a lot of autonomy and freedom. So this has to go with structural change as well. But I welcome it. I think it's a good conversational starter, but you can't do it unless you change the culture as well.
Yeah. We're too busy towing the party line, unfortunately.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, on to our second story this week, and it's a different aspect of teaching. Our second story is about discipline and disruption in classes. Too many of us have reached our critical mass of disruption. Now, look, we do all know that for effective teaching and learning to happen, there has to be discipline. Now, what that looks like in one class is very different. So discipline in a languages class is very different from PE, which is very different from music, which is maybe different from maths, and so on. But Peter Caspel, who's a teacher, makes the argument that teachers' confidence dips, our lessons falter, and we get a lot closer to burnout when we reach what he describes as our critical mass. And he kind of says behavior might be getting worse. Is behavior getting worse, John?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? I mean, because we tend to think that through time. So there are periods of time when young people today, behavior is getting worse. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but there's also actual evidence. There's a lot of, there are more exclusions, there are more suspensions, there's a decline there's a crisis of attendance. So things are happening. And enough teachers are saying this sort of thing that you have to take it very seriously. And this kind of, I love the way this article describes the kind of arc of experience a lot of teachers have. You know, you start as a young teacher, it's really tough. You know, you don't have the authority, you haven't learned all the little tricks, the kids are just playing you like a, you know, completely, you're the plaything of these class. And then over time goes by, you move them around, you learn the seating plans, you greet them at the door, all the tricks that seem to have eyes in the back of your head. How does he know I'm doing this? And so on. That, you know, yes, toward the end of your middle or the end of your career, I don't really have a problem with discipline anymore. You're one of those teachers you admired when you first began your teaching. But you did know that, yeah, you can handle one or two disruptive kids. Can you handle 4 or 5? And if you've got 4 or 5 in a class, well, then there's a tipping point where the most experienced techniques don't work. And then you say, well, where are we with that? And I hopefully what I don't want to happen is the idea that young people today, and it's all about the home, it's about the environment, they don't know how to be disciplined and so on. Something significant is happening when we start to see poor discipline in schools. And if it continues, and if more and more teachers say that discipline is a horrible experience having poor discipline, if poor discipline in schools continues, then we have to take seriously what's happening in our education system: examinations, stress, structure of education, expectations, and alternative provision. And not simply think, well, if the kids came from decent homes, and don't other them into being the problem. Kids with a problem in class and poorly behaved. One last thought. When I was glad a kid was sent out of class, God, I'm glad he's gone. I realized that me and him were part of the same thing. We were both flies caught in the same web. It was a problem. I was as much trapped as he was.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know, the writer of this story, Brent, Peter Caspel, who is a teacher, you know, he makes the case for answers to better behavior lying in different areas. So he talks, and I know it's a huge subject and it's a shortish article, but he goes very quickly to pupil referral units, senior leadership, the school culture, CPD, parents. Where does the responsibility for behavior, whereabouts in my classroom, where does it lie?
Look, the thing is, we can all say that every generation has its kind of behavioral issues, and I think it's always constantly evolving behavior. And obviously, our countermeasures, it's like a cold war, isn't it? You know, they come up with a way of behaving, we come up with a way of countering their behavior. It's just the mental chess of being a teacher to a child. So be it the nature of our job. And that's what we have to constantly do, have to constantly evaluate, evolve, and change our behavior practices. But there is a couple of patterns that are concerning, and this is global. Social media, you're talking about behavior, children presenting in ways that they've never presented before. The TikTok phenomenon, the way they can share bad behavior almost instantaneously across global networks. So we're having to work very quickly with behaviors we've never dealt before. We saw that during COVID. And I have had to sort of second guess myself sometimes and think, and behavior management is something that I was very strong on, but then I was being questioned. You know, am I raising my voice too much? And I'm quite a loud guy, and I've had children say, "Are you shouting at me, sir?" And I'm going, "No, this is not shouting. This is me raising my voice. Would you like me to shout?" I actually had a situation where I took a group of children outside and says, "You stand over here, and I'm going to shout at you from a distance. This is a shout. This is me raising my voice." And it's getting to the stage now where I'm being chipped away, undermined, and almost discipline's a dirty word. How dare I discipline these children? How dare I make them feel guilty? How dare I make them feel bad about themselves? Damn skippy, I'm going to make them feel bad about themselves because they've got to learn. Life has to have some rules and boundaries. I mean, it does feel like we're living in Lord of the Flies territory now in schools, because how dare you stand up for yourself as a teacher? How dare you hold the line? How dare you instill discipline? And it's almost now we get a bunch of psychologists out there who are saying, you know, don't use guilt and shame on children. Don't do this, don't do that. And you're going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Do you want to get your backside into the classroom and try and discipline 30 children? Oh, no, you don't discipline them. We're going to sit there and have a restorative conversation. I'll try and do a restorative conversation with 417 students, shall I? And that's the problem, is I know how we could do it better, but I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I don't have the support, and we don't have an industrial revolution type of schooling with a winner, you know, with a one size takes all. We can't do that. We have to have 30 children in a classroom. You have to do old school discipline. And I know people are now moving away from that, but until they come up with a way of reducing class sizes, until they come up with a way of increasing the corridor space so we don't have stressed out corridors, and until they change the dynamics and structure of our education, there's no point in trying to change what our behavior routines are until you change those things. Because what we get is now contradictory of, you're a bad teacher if you discipline the children. Because, and again, we're being criticized by educational psychologists saying, you know, these rules, these kids, and you're getting a lot of parents who are going along and saying, oh, I felt that way at school. That's fine. But what are their solutions? And I don't see that they have solutions, a lot of these educational psychologists. They're telling us what we should be doing, but they don't come into schools and practically say, this is how you do 30 children. And that's when it comes down to it. I never criticize anybody's behavior management, because everybody does it slightly different, because everybody's personality is slightly different. I can do some things that some of my colleagues can do, and equally, I can walk into a room with 600 kids and pretty much do old school sergeant major, and they will listen to me. Some people can do that, some people can't. I think you should have a little bit of, again, that freedom within reason to do behavior management, what works for you and what works for your school and your setting. And again, some trust bodies and some schools don't do that. They tell you this is how you do behavior management. So I think, to finish my point, a lot of teachers are undermined. Their confidence has been chipped away at it. They get a lot of low-level concerns for doing the things they've done for 25, 30 years. And all of a sudden, the goalposts have shifted. And we're having to shift quicker than we probably ever have, because it's just an ever moving mosaic.
And all the while, you know, the expectations on us for outcomes, for results, are increasing. Lucy, if I could come to you for a moment, and I know you've spoken to people, you know, about how discipline is becoming in primary schools. What's your experience of primary schools and discipline?
I mean, it is interesting and it is changing. And I don't want to turn this into a kind of a man versus a woman thing, but I do want to pick up on something Brent just said. Brent, you could walk into a room and raise your voice, and it will have a very different impact to me doing it. Yeah. You will get probably the absolute, I won't get that, because I am a small woman. And this in primary school, unfortunately, is becoming a thing as well, that I don't want to go too much feminist rant, but female teachers, we are, and even at primary level, certainly at upper primary level, are starting to lose that grip a bit, because you are getting the kind of back chat from particularly from the boys that you weren't getting before, again because of the social media exposure and things like that. And it's not just that. I also do, and this is maybe kind of sort of hippie teacher heart comes into it, togetherness thing. There's a huge disconnect happen between schools and families, and again, this is a global thing as well. We've sort of lost touch with each other, and a huge amount of finger pointing going on. Well, actually, no, is this a parent job? And instead of kind of trying to bring and it's very difficult depending on, well, harder in certain communities because there is still kind of a difficulty with how some parents feel about school, etc. But I do think schools fundamentally need to work on bringing, we are centers of communities. That is a large part of what we do. And if we're not bringing these people back together, then I think we're going to have increased difficulty. I don't know what the answer is overall, and I feel I haven't answered your question at all there, but that's just kind of a condensed version of my thoughts.
But your thoughts are very valid, of course, and it's an enormous area, and we wish we had a magic wand, but I don't think we'll solve it here.
Can I just one quick point? You're absolutely right, Lucy. The amount of times as a union rep I've had to step in, and because female colleagues have been undermined by parents also. I've had misogyny. I've challenged misogyny from some parents towards some of my female colleagues, and then I realized that's where the children are getting it. And I don't know whether I'm more sensitive and aware of it. And I think there is that aspect as well of maybe we are more attuned to those type of behaviors. But you are absolutely correct. The amount of times I've had to go into a dining hall and sort of use I would call it like Jedi presence, because sort of my presence resonates like a sort of like the voice, the person. But I get criticized for that too. I've run the line where somebody like, I'm shouting at the children. I get pushback. I've had complaints about the tone of voice I'm using, and I'm scaring the child and all the rest of it. And it sort of, you're damned you do, you're damned you don't, because if I use my sort of persona, I'm therefore open to criticism of using that persona. And that's the real risk that you have, if you're a powerful person and you have to restrain that. But where is the line? And the line just changes all the time,
Yeah. And I think, as we can see on the screen now, a point from JBL, who's making a couple of points, but certainly one of them's fitting in with what you're saying there, Brent. When teachers go in and they bring a framework of discipline, maybe to an unruly crowd in a canteen or something, yes, it can get turned around and we can become the target, in something of a kind of a smoke and mirrors with children to kind of slip away with their behaviors. We'll turn it on the teacher. Oh, he's big, he's cross, he shouted. Yeah. But look, as I say, it's not an area that we are going to resolve this morning. And all schools have to come back to discipline, behavior and relationships regularly. On to our third story this morning. And this is a story that suggests 5 ways schools should approach critical thinking. Now, Bridget Phillipson tells us that under Labour's curriculum review, they will develop plans to embed critical skills in lessons to arm children against the disinformation, fake news, and putrid conspiracy theories awash on social media. Gosh, that's a big claim. It's a bit of an angry claim, I think, too. But Brent, are we maybe seeing something on the horizon then, that at least the curriculum will have some aspects that address things like fake news, social media, and all those poisonous things that are happening with our young people?
I mean, I don't know where they've been all my teaching career, because that's what I've been doing every history lesson, to be perfectly honest with you. I think my English colleagues pretty much do exactly the same as well. And I'm sure many other subjects we look at, the scientists would probably question the validity of that, talking about mathematicians and statisticians talk about the quality of data and quality, the sources. So I think this is one of those grabbing a headlines things. Let's teach our kids more critical thinking. we've been doing it and we are doing it. The problem is they need to sort of practice what they have preached. Let's be frankly honest with you, because the people at the top are part of the problem. So when our politicians and our churches and our banks and all those institutions that have failed us in the last generation get their act together and stop doing all the stuff that they're doing, when the leadership of the country tells us 14 times they're having parties when they're having parties, when one of the most powerful men in the world pretty much can say what he wants, when we have a whole platform of social media out there, which basically now is hyperbolized, we are, what are we, fingers in the dike. So it's great. It really rankers on me when they go, here's a problem in society. What are they teaching them in schools? Kids aren't the problem. Parents are the problem. Adults are the problem. Social media is the problem. And what they're learning from, we could tell these children at school and be completely undermined as soon as they switch on their phone, or as soon as they switch on talk to a parent who's down the conspiracy theory thing. And that's where we're at now. We're at the situation now where I've had to challenge some parents because climate change isn't real. This isn't that. This is not. I'm going, whoa. Because we're at the stage now where teachers are, not listened to by some children because I'm not listening to you. Why? Because you're one of these people. We really, the government, if they think that teaching children critical thinking at school is going to solve the problem, that they're well beyond where the problem actually currently is. Yeah, it's welcomed. It's a good idea. But at the same time, that's a very small part of a bigger problem that needs to be resolved. And all schools are showing there is obviously the barometer of where society's at. But you can't fix society by just basically saying, what are they teaching the kids at school with an overloaded curriculum? Sorry about that, but no, this is a good headline grabber. But in practicality, let's look at the whole picture of what's happening in false news, false media, social media, the whole shebang. It took 4 years to do the online digital bill. So the government needs to get its act together and move a lot quicker and close off all these false information stems, because otherwise we just again be undermined. What we teach in school will completely be irrelevant because it'll be the opposite of what they're told.
John, I saw you nodding there a moment ago when Brent kind of alluded to, how will schools cope with that? But I'll maybe come to that in a moment. Lucy, can I ask you, and I do accept, that history teachers and so on have done this kind of thing for a long time. They tried to teach, critical thinking, critical literacy, and so on, right? But I still think, more needs to be done right across the board because our children aren't able to think critically. They don't have critical literacy abilities. But if this were implemented, what could it achieve? What could a program of critical literacy, critical thinking achieve? And I should say all 3 articles this morning, by the way, are written by teachers, which I love to see. And Bernard Andrews, who wrote this one, is a philosophy teacher. But Lucy, back to the point. What could?
I have a philosophy A-level, and my philosophy teachers were marvelous. So I did get quite excited to see that he was a philosophy teacher. The hard truth is this needs to start from dot. Really, these skills need to be. By the time you're starting to teach this in secondary school, it's too late. In this day and age, it's too late, and that's the truth. Trying to implement this at a young age, you are going to be met with difficulty because parents are not. Some of the issues that I think should be discussing, some of the realities of today's society, some of the things that parents are very quick to have opinions on and to share with their children and are kind of openly discussing. But, if you start discussing it, you're going to end up in big trouble. So there is a difficulty here. I absolutely do think these skills should be, and I try to sort of, certainly with my younger ones, talk about things like saying, even kind of starting with the basics of, you might feel this way about something, it doesn't make you right. And just even little things like that, and starting to kind of just instill the idea that you do have freedom of speech. You do have, a right to do certain things. And I actually always have the Convention of Children's Rights on my wall, and we talk about it quite openly. I know Brent sort of knows that, or sort of thinks things like that often get taken too far, and sometimes they do. But it's such a gray area, and again, it's one of those things that is such a good idea in theory, but do you really want us to do this? Do you really? Because I've had parents come to me and say, oh, you need to do workshops on things like TikTok. I'm like, that's great, but you might feel like that, but the parent over there would take my head off, to be honest, if I started talking about that with a group of 10-year-olds, because in their opinion, they shouldn't be on it anyway, which they shouldn't. But it's something that should be throughout a curriculum from a young age. But how you're going to do that and keep people happy and keep teachers safe as well, because there's a safety aspect to this. Because yes, you want us to teach these skills, but people don't like it. A lot of people don't like it. So lovely idea. Theory is another one of these things, isn't it? Theory, great. Practice.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
So I think we're all agreed that, teaching critical thinking, critical literacy is a very good thing. And notwithstanding, the issues and difficulties that Brent and Lucy have pointed out, they're very real ones. John, are schools aligned? Are they set up to teach critical thinking?
No, not really, because of the things we talked about earlier, the pressures of the curriculum and so on, the content led. But we're not set up as a society to think about critical thinking. That's why there's a degree of hypocrisy about this. Not only, as Brent brilliantly pointed out, that you urge schools to do something they should be doing anyway. Critical thinking, as far as I can tell from these 5 points, is just education. That's all it is. Just to have education in schools. But when schools are in, there's an implication they haven't been doing critical thinking, which is embedded in everything we do. And there's an implication that schools can solve a problem, as Brent rightly points out, that is the lies and the hypocrisy of society out there as well, and that schools are somehow going to be beacons of solution to this problem, beacons of critical thinking. And as Lucy points out, the first critical thinker maybe to be put to death was Socrates, and he's put down for, critical thinking is not always welcomed if you actually genuinely did it in schools. Because if you do critical thinking genuinely in schools, and they're not places that are susceptible to critical thinking, because everything else, from the teacher being told how to teach the lessons, from the content that you have to deliver, from the formulaic way that schools are moving, and out there in society, if you had to write a history book of our age, you'd give it the title of the age of conformity. Everything about our society there are all sorts of things we don't ask questions about. We don't ask questions about the economic structure in our society. We don't ask questions about class biases and so forth. We don't ask questions. All sorts of things are just taken as ordinary and everyday and unchangeable. Distribution of wealth and so on. You can't talk about these things. So we are a deeply uncritical society. And so it's highly hypocritical of us to urge schools to somehow teach critical thinking. And it's a way of sticking plastering over it. If the schools are teaching critical thinking, then that's okay. We have somehow solved that problem. And we must be critically thinking about critical thinking as well. Because critical thinking can be relativistic. So in the end, you say, well, things must stay the way they are because there are always two sides to every argument, which neutralizes any actual inquiry. So, no, schools are terrible places for critical thinking, apart from they're doing it all the time anyway. So
I call it silence and compliance.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Goodness, thank you very much. 3 super stories this morning. Every one of them has sparked off tangents of thought and debate for us. But our show this morning is brought to you by John Catt, educational publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. And if you use the code JCTTR2425, they'll give you 20% off your order. Oh, I was on a different screen reading that. Oh, dear. Anyway, so to our shows of the week, and I think we need to be fairly sharp on this. I'll go first. I listened to Darren Lester's show, Decoding Leadership, yesterday morning. Darren's shows are great. They always take you on these long, kind of wonderful, humorous stories, kind of with interesting perspectives and so on. Decoding Leadership was really interesting because a couple of weeks ago, we listened to, and I think we reviewed, Amanda Kinsley-Smith's show, which was very much about deliberately staying in the classroom as a teacher. So very good to contrast those two programs. Very entertaining. Darren had to manage a spider at one stage in his studio, and that gives a lot of drama. And you know, I like a lot of drama in a show. But as ever, the spider just came down to see what's in Darren's kind of web of wisdom. First class show. If you're embarking on leadership, management, doing masters or whatever, you'll get a lot from it. Lucy, what about you? What have you listened to this week?
It was Tom Rogers' this week, which was all about his solo for once, which is always a choice, always a difficult thing to do. But it was actually hear some of Tom's own experiences about starting new schools, about his career and his journey, and the advice that he has picked up along the way himself, but also advice from other teachers. So, I mean, things that we know, but things that often bear reiterating. Like, you know, making sure that you're taking time during the day, things like that, making sure that, you know, you're seeking colleague support and help. And as much as it's things that we know, I do think it's important to just kind of, as we ease into September, I think it's important to remind ourselves of these things, even those of us who are sort of longer in the game, because we forget. So it's well worth a listen to, particularly as we head into the start of the new academic year.
I agree. Yeah, lots of those little practical things are well worth remembering because we're so focused on other things. We forget to look after ourselves sometimes. John, has anything caught your ear or your eye this week?
Absolutely. Yes, it was yourself, Paul, and Brent, and the GCSE exam special. And if anyone's listening to this and they're a parent, or people have taken exams, or you've just taken exams, or you're a teacher and you haven't listened to this, then stop, put your breakfast down, turn off the lawnmower, get the earplugs in, listen to this, because you need to have you need to listen to this discussion. We need as a society to have a serious think about exams and what they do and what they're for. And every year they come around and we go, oh, yes, brilliant. If they go up, schools are marvelous, but kids are somehow, but standards are falling. If they go down, then kids are all thick and the teachers are failing. We're as a society deeply confused about the poisonous effect of exams. And the guest on it, Sammy Wright, who you can listen to his book being serialized on radio for, is saying a lot of very important things. So don't miss this show. Listen to it now.
It's great, very enjoyable as well to do. Yeah, great. Brent, what about you? Anything caught your ear or eye this week?
Oh, Lucy has caught my ear and eye this week because she's caught up on an idea that I've thought a couple of times: sabbaticals. So looking with Seb Ventura and looking at the idea of why aren't they more of a thing? That would help with recruitment, retention, that would help stop burnout. So really good discussion about should they offer more sabbaticals, should there be more opportunity for teacher sabbaticals, and that will help with the longevity of career. So looking at the idea of sabbaticals, really, really good because, someone who's length of time I'm in teaching have thought sometimes about stepping down from some roles or taking less days. But actually, sabbatical sometimes is what people need, isn't it? Just to recharge the batteries. So it's really worth a good listen to, and maybe policymakers should probably listen to that too as well. Maybe a lot of policymakers should be listening to all our shows. Let's be honest with you, they might learn a few things.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so or maybe we could become policymakers. Maybe I should have a sabbatical to become a policymaker. Try that, But yeah, Lucy's show this week on.
You heard it here first, people.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But that's all they're going to hear today because we're right out of time. Thank you very much to our sponsors, John Catt. And many thanks to this week's panel, John Gibbs, Lucy Newberger, Brent Poland, and of course, not forgetting the background team. Enjoy your long weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.